Welcome to the sketch presentation. My name is Mark Sithian. The date today is May 22nd, 2025. So this presentation is going to focus on how to increase probability of surviving a nuclear strike. So let's say you're at ground zero and an incoming warhead isn't directly on ground zero where you're located at, but what will happen actually as the MIRV payload separates, the warhead is converting matter to energy through the relationship between energy and matter. E is equal to mc squared. So the warhead consists of uranium-235 isotope, which is enriched in the centrifuge, so it takes it up several hundred electrons, so it's enriched uranium. So nuclear bomb is kind of like the wrong word terminology, but it's actually the quantum detangling or conversion of matter to energy. So atom number one of the uranium-235 warhead payload will then implode, usually from an arc electron implosion, slug detonation, and this will then release the neutrinos, converting the first atom from matter into energy, and then the chain reaction happens to all the atoms of the uranium-235 payload. So you could use Avogadro's number to figure that out by mass, and you'd have to get the molar mass of uranium-235, so we have E is equal to mc squared. And so what's happening, the mass is multiplying itself times the speed of light squared, and then we have matter converted to pure energy. So it's like we're releasing sunlight out of material. So this is the principle of nuclear physics, converting matter to energy, whereas quantum physics is going from energy waves into back to matter. So that's more like electrophoretics and chemistry, but we'll just stay on point here. So it's not like an incendiary bomb that hits the is impact or combustion detonated. It is converting literally matter to energy. So all the matter is then converted into energy in the form of neutrinos. So that's where you get the mushroom cloud. Now all the material involved has been converted into energy. So you see the mushroom cloud. Then the air as a fluid, both gases and liquids are fluids, absorbs all that energy, really can't handle it, so it expands. And prior to that event, we have an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP. So this will then induce magnetic depolarization up to a 50-mile radius. And so all electrical systems fail. Batteries discharge. Probably hard drives will scrub and format, and then generators, they lose their magnetic field, so even if you rotate the magnet, change the poles, you won't get any electrical power. And then the engine running it, its high energy ignition system fails, so everything shuts down. It's like instantly. And then RF, radio frequency, and microwaves cease, so all wireless communication, Wi-Fi ceases. Signals collapse because there's no standing magnetic field. So this degausses the electrical and electronic equipment, and then digital electronics not just fail, but they fry out because they hold an inverse Gauss charge of inductance in the wrong direction, and then it just turns into electrical shorting and it fries out the digital circuits. However, analog vacuum tubes actually survive the EMP, and old pre-1950s telecom still works. So that's why even on a lot of military and NASA's craft, when they get close to the Van Allen radiation belt, they actually have pre-1950s electrical systems, vacuum tube inerted for EMPs, and then they translate and convert it into hybrid analog to digital, and then purely plasma glass digital systems, touchscreens, over the 1950s vacuum tube. So all of that fails, and then it's just hands-on levers that go to 1940s type electric motors that are vacuum tube controlled. So you have then still hydraulic control from a lever. But that is if the rules are broken and you fly too close to the Van Allen, then, if that flight or astronautics parameter is violated, then you have some problems. You probably have a mission failure, destruction of the craft. But fortunately, the human bioelectrics, the cardio electric systems still work. So the EMP won't affect the human biology. But, if you have any implants, then probably yes. Okay, so now we got past 1, and then 2, we have the actual transverse shock wave, which is a mechanical concentric shock wave. It's a combination of rarefactions and sound. So this is enough to just vibrate organs and various materials apart mechanically. Definitely enough to knock down somebody a few miles away. Would definitely blow the windows out of houses. So that's immediately afterwards you get the concentric shock wave. This might be about 4 or 5 seconds after the mushroom cloud. So we're slowing this down. So it's a good idea to hide in sewers. And if you kind of practice, you have a crowbar, you have a sewer in the street, you see a mushroom cloud, you'll probably survive the initial shock wave by jumping in a sewer if you can pry it open, or going inside a concrete basement, or hiding in a concrete pipe even. So initially, in the first maybe 10 seconds, if you're quick, you have close to a 70% survival rate, but not at ground zero. Definitely be instant incineration. So this is the first 5 to 15 seconds. So sorry, at ground zero, you won't even know what happened. Okay, so now number 3, we have the mass destruction, because all that energy has absorbed into the air and expanded the airflow as a fluid medium, increasing the temperature of the air to about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and then accelerating it outward to about the speed of sound, about 1,100 feet per second, so Mach 1. So you would probably escape the nuclear winds. This is called nuclear winds, when the air absorbs all of the energy and blasts out. And so you have this nuclear wind. And then not too long after, all of the debris, for example, steel will liquefy and then vaporize to gas. So steel will absorb a lot of heat. Wood and all that, biology will just incinerate instantly, or be left vitrified or petrified. So you have all this debris from the materials burning up into atmospheric debris. So this will block out the sun, and then you'll have darkness for many days. This is called the nuclear winter that follows the nuclear winds. So the nuclear winter is not right away, but it may take by the end, not too long after. It's just nighttime all the time, and then the temperature will drop to sub-zero. Even in a hot climate, it will be freezing. So this is the nuclear wind and nuclear winter. So 0 feet AGL, that's ground level, above ground level 0. So then next we have and here is you or I, we're here. And then, so assume we didn't get hit ground 0. Next is the gamma wave radioactive propagations. This is the high frequency much higher than the microwave spectrum, but what this frequency will have chemical equivalents to is the iodine 137 isotope. So iodine naturally has atomic number 53, so 53 electrons. So based on the phenomena, the gamma wave is equivalent to an iodine atom that has an additional amount of electrons reaching 137 electron count. So that is the isotope. So this is what enters the thyroid gland of mammals and then leads to radiation sickness. So what fights the gamma wave radiation contamination is the natural iodine. Iodine 53. This is stuff you can just buy, the brown colored iodine, and also if you stock up on sardines, and let's say you have a lead cased concrete fallout shelter to not only shield you from the nuclear winds but also the gamma wave radiation, you could keep a few months purified water supply, iodine, betadine, and just loads of sardines. So sardines is a superfood, but there's an enormous amount of iodine in sardines. So if you want to prevent thyroid problems anyway, you can eat sardines and then keep sea salt, which actually the saline solution that paramedics inject into people during cardiovascular events is what restarts your heart. So we have so many different bodies, societies saying one thing and another, but those people who work in emergency services know that large doses of sodium chloride along with potassium chloride and magnesium chloride is what stabilizes the heart. So you could also keep pumpkin seeds, sea salt, and purified water, and sardines, betadine and iodine, and you just load up on these after the fallout begins, staying in that containment. So tons of iodine 53, that's very good. And then load up on iodine 53, and then there's about 500 rads to 2,000 rads exposure on a typical nuclear strike. And remember, these big 20 megaton nukes are not feasible. They're just science experiments. So most of the nukes, each warhead would probably be 150 kilotons, 0.15 megatons, because the people who fire these nukes will also be affected by anything greater than that. The fallout and the shockwave will just go back around the world to them. So they're just testing the limits, but the actual tactical nuclear abilities are no more than 100 to 150 kilotons, about what the Hiroshima nukes were. That's the only practical nukes, unless everybody on Earth is destroyed. So the people launching nukes don't want to be destroyed. They want to kill others and survive. But so you're looking at about 500 to 2,000 rads exposure during a 150 kiloton nuclear strike. And then there's a dissipation of about 200 rads of radiation per week. So if you do the math on it, it's about 3 to 6 weeks hiding in concrete and lead encased bunker, or even a sewer. Maybe you'd get away. I think the radiation would go into the sewer, but if you have a lead encased fallout shelter would guarantee it. And then you still take a lot of iodine 53, sardines, meals ready to eat. Also pumpkin seeds are good. There's a lot of magnesium and potassium in that. You take that with sea salt and water. So remember, when they stabilize a cardiovascular event, the ambulance, they actually inject saline solution into you. So one body of medicine or whatever tell you to avoid salt, but then another, like the ambulance, will say no, that's how your heart's restarted, because your heart's an electrical system that runs on electrolytes. So contracting the muscle is the sodium, and then relaxing it is the potassium. And then the magnesium is what really stabilizes all muscles, including the heart and the body, the diaphragm. So you can keep a good amount of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium. But if you want to really get a good dose, you can use pumpkin seeds and sea salt along with purified water, and then sardines, and then betadine, food grade iodine, and sardines are full of iodine as well. So if you could hide inside a lead atomic periodic table elements PB concrete, so lead encased concrete containment, or if you know of any fallout shelters ahead of time, you might be able to like sneak in there, because nobody's taking this nuclear threat seriously. But if there's any fallout shelters that nobody cares about, even in abandoned houses or schools, you could run in there while everybody's like, what are you doing? You're like, oh, I'm running out into the fallout shelter, and at least be shielded from the radiation. So if you're aware of it ahead of time, you might say, hey, it's a weekend, what are we going to do? And you find some abandoned schools or buildings and they have a fallout shelter in there, and you can actually go in there. Then that might be a possibility. So hide inside lead concrete containment or inside sewer for 3 to 6 weeks. At least the sewer might increase probability of survival, but you have to tough it out for 3 to 6 weeks somehow. And probably going in your basement would work. And I don't know if there's things that have lead in it, but if you could put lead pipes around your wall, try something at least. And take a lot of iodine 53. So iodine 53 is going to neutralize the iodine 137 radioactive isotope from the gamma waves. And so one fights the other. If you have more iodine 53, it fights the iodine 137. And then they're like, oh, you survived the radiation sickness. And you'll know it. If your hair doesn't fall out, and you're not sick, then you survived it. So if possible. And then next is the aftermath survivability, number 5. And that's about 30%, because there's an old saying that the survivors have it the worst. So find a shovel, start grading the topsoil after all of the destruction clears. A couple months later, if you can tough it out, and try to grade the topsoil and look for subsurface germination, like anything, like some roots or some alfalfa growing, or anything growing. Then the radiation is past. Because if everything's dead and discolored, the radiation's still there. And then keep a Geiger counter, keychain one, if you can. Because people aren't thinking about this. You don't even care, but they do sell Geiger counters on your keychain, and they just go off making little radio sound imprints if the radiation's too high. The gamma wave radiation, these are all different types of radiation, but nuclear gamma wave radiation. So look for survivors if still alive and your hair has not fallen out. Load up on iodine 53. That's just food grade iodine, the brown colored stuff that you can get at these Rite Aid stores or whatever, or you can order it online. And then betadine actually works too. So when you're trying to stop infection and you're trying to just clean a wound and then put it back together so the body heals it, you put a lot of betadine. But you can actually drink that. It's totally gross, but it's definitely going to jack up your iodine 53 levels. And you just might fight off all the iodine 137 and say, yay, how did you survive the radiation? He says, well, antidote is iodine 53. So you have to walk and defend yourself somehow, or, if you're armed, I wouldn't just be on a paranoid sense. I would try to say, hey, you survived too. Never, if you're armed, just don't be confrontational. Don't let anybody know you're armed unless you have to, right? And so you're probably like, hey, you made it too. You survived too. You're a pro, and try to be friends. And because chances are people all want to eat and they want to survive and make friends. So I don't know. It could be criminal events, like if you have people on drugs and people have some screwy problems, whatever. But I think most people will be like, "Hey, you made it too. You survived," and they'd probably just work together. But when people don't have what they're used to, I would be pragmatic in your interaction until you get to know enough people. And so then, wherever there's germination, there's probably going to be fish and clean water, and you'll be able to hunt. Trust me, if you haven't eaten in 10 days, you're probably going to just eat plants. You can eat a lot of plants, and your body will turn that into energy. It won't taste good, but at least you'll survive. Hunt, fish, eat plants, find water streams, and if there is germination present, then if there is, then the poisoning is cleared, the radioactive poisoning is cleared, but if not, then it's still poison, and then you're going to have to move on. So that's 5, 6, and 7. So aftermath survivability, it's about 30%. You're going to have to walk about 20 miles, and that's assuming there's no additional nuclear strikes. There might be a whole lot of them, but there might be multiple 150 kiloton warheads that hit, and then they clear, and it's a little bit longer hiding. And then in the outskirts, there's no more attacks, or you might be in a secluded area that is not a high tactical target, and so they miss you. You get a few hits. But big cities are probably really going to get obliterated. I don't know if there will be any survivors there, but just saying, it's not a 0% survival. There's people who survive. So 5, 6, and 7, lock to the outskirts, and then we have number 8, aftermath survivability 2. It's the second part. So it goes down from 5 to 30%. So we're assuming no additional nuclear strikes and hostile survivors. Then next good step is to migrate as far as possible to non-poisoned lands to begin farming, hunting, and fishing. There's a lot of ways you don't just have firearms, a lot of ways to yield potential energy, like in homemade bows, and you're going to have to do some craft work and maybe make spears and hide, and because our ancestors did this when big, worse than nuclear attacks like volcanoes occurred for about 200,000 years, and we're still here. So I'm just saying this is like a change in lifestyle from civilization to survival. And when people are motivated and hungry, they get very smart. So, all right, so then migrate as far as possible to non-poisoned land and begin farming, hunting, and fishing, filtering and boiling water, because you can boil out the biological poisons, but you can't boil out the chemical poisons. So you might have to use rock filters or find waterfalls if they're still around. Because a lot of people in their states, they don't even know what's in their state. They just do the same thing in their one location, and then when civilization collapses, they might be able to walk somewhere out in the middle of nowhere and say, wow, there's a clean waterfall here. We didn't even know this exists. So there you go. There's your water. And if it's coming off waterfalls and a lot of calcium carbonate rock, it's probably already filtered. And then the goldfish test is another one. Like if there's goldfish, they're very sensitive to water toxicity. They just die. And if you can find any goldfish and they're still living, that water is drinkable. So learn how to start fires. You can actually rub sticks. It seems crazy, but if you try it, you go on real camping and hunting trips where you have to survive without anything. But other ways is the magnifying glass. You might want to keep a magnifying glass in your bunker if you have one. And magnifying glass and sunlight, you focalize the sun area of the refractive index, the focal point, and get it down to like a 1/4 inch. It'll dry enough, it will set off sections of wood material, or you can, if you have a knife, you can scrape off wood sections that are dry. It'll catch on fire. Throw a little air onto it, a little bit of oxygen in the air, 21%. It'll grow. So then you have heat, and so you can boil the water, etc. Again, how are you going to boil it? You don't have any pots and pans, but you can figure something out. There's a lot of ways to like heat rocks, flat plate, shell rocks, and then get them hot. And you might have to like figure it out, because our ancestors figured this out during global cataclysms, and we didn't go extinct. So there's a way to figure things out. Like, for example, if you have anything that's a stone casing, or even taking rock. I mean, it would be very hard, but you could try to craft stone into bowls and heat them up. And at least you're getting some water, but for the time being, you're just going to have to drink the water available that is perhaps at streams and lakes. And if the fish are not dying, then you're good. If the fish are in there are still living, you can drink that water. And there's other berries and plants that are natural disinfectants too. You can try that, but just try to forage. That's all I'm going to say about that one. So learn how to start fires. And there's different ways. Chemical flames. There might be chemical. There even might be electrical grids left over. There's standing power, and if you can carefully, ungrounded, start an electrical fire, then you got some flames. Okay, that's 8. And then 9 is the Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivability in 1945 in Japan, as documented, was 70%, and that includes injured and uninjured, so it's pretty high. But the uninjured, completely intact, untouched, was about 35 to 40%. So it's not correct to say a nuclear strike is 0% survivability. It is survivable, but not very high. Many Japanese lived into old age, 95 plus, to talk about their surviving the Hiroshima and Nagasaki attacks. Nuclear strike at the end of World War II from the United States, their strike on Japan. So if you get hit at ground zero, don't worry. You won't even feel it. You'll instantly go to the other side as immortal consciousness. So you're alive in the flesh here, and then a split second later, you're on the other side. So I talked to a lot of people about nuclear, just to teach the nuclear, biological, and chemical safety and chemical weapons survivability course. And some of our students were military veterans, and they said, yeah, well, if you get hit ground zero, it's your ticket to paradise. So they weren't really worried about it, but they were more worried about the survivors, the type of hell they would go through. But if you're not on ground zero, but you see the mushroom cloud, then you have some options to at least increase your probability of survival. So the advantage of surviving is, even though it'll be pure hell for a long time, the advantage of survivors is that, of course, the burden is they'll have to work very hard to survive and rebuild civilization. But if so, they will be the heroes of the future. People will say, wow, you were one of the survivors of the second nuclear proliferation, World War III, or whatever you want to call it. And, you're 98 years old and you're talking about it and whatever future world there is. But the world will not end. Maybe countries and empires will end, yes, but civilization will not end, because the people running the show, they don't want to be destroyed either. They can have nuclear bunkers and all that, but they know if they launch a real, I want to say a 20 megaton, it's lights out for everybody. So they're not going to go over a 100 to 150 kilotons, 0.15 megatons per warhead, because the nuclear war is really a tactical nuclear war. So I know the movies like to tell you like the whole place is going to go, but it's going to be very concentrated because the people running the show, somebody's behind all this. They don't want to be destroyed. They want to live into the future. So nuclear wars are between, we'll go by Hiroshima, it's between 35 and 70% survivability, but the survivors for Aftermath 2, after the radioactive fallout and the aftermath, second aftermath, that's could be as low as 5 to 30%, 5 to 35%. But if you're one of the survivors and we do have a nuclear strike, then you will be a hero in the future. People will just want to know all about how did you do this. And so that ends this sketch presentation. And the date today is May 22nd, 2025. Mark Scythian, and thanks for watching.